Imagine you are, just walking outside and you see the most beautiful sunset.
Oh, yeah.
The sky is just, it's exploding with these vibrant oranges and deep purples. What actually happens in your brain right in that exact moment?
Right, like what's the very first impulse?
Exactly. Do you look at it, label the colors in the sky in your native language, and then mentally translate those words into English before you can finally say, wow, look at that sky?
Most people do.
Yeah, because if you are running that mental translation program every single time you try to speak, you are definitely not alone.
Not at all. And that tiny delay that 3 to 5 seconds it takes to run a thought through that mental translation bridge, that is the central mechanism behind what linguists call the intermediate plateau.
Oh man, the plateau, it's the worst.
It's a highly specific kind of frustration. You have the knowledge, you've memorized the vocabulary, you actually understand the rules, and, well, you have probably passed the written tests.
Right, you look great on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the moment you find yourself in a live, totally unpredictable conversation, the speed of the exchange just overwhelms that translation process. You end up freezing, not because you don't know the language, but because you just don't have the fluency to access it in real time.
Which is an incredibly common wall to hit.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We are looking at a masterclass from our sources today on how to, completely bypass that mental translation layer.
It's totally possible, too.
It really is. We're going to explore how to physically rewire your brain to think directly in English or, frankly, any target language you're working on. And I think the best part is we're looking at how to do this without relying on grueling, tedious grammar rules.
Because it requires a complete paradigm shift in how we approach adult language learning. The way most of us were taught a second language in a traditional classroom setting.
The textbook drills.
Yeah, all of that. It is actually fundamentally misaligned with how the human brain processes and produces fluent speech. Okay, let's visualize this structural problem for a second, because the sources have this great analogy. Think of your brain as a sprawling city, right, divided into two distinct districts.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. So your native language is this massive, highly efficient downtown district. It has wide, multi-lane highways, skyscrapers, everything connects seamlessly, and traffic just flows perfectly without you ever really having to think about it.
Right, it's automatic.
Totally. Now, your English district is a bit smaller, maybe it's like a suburb, but the actual size or vocabulary limit of that English suburb isn't the primary issue. The real bottleneck is the infrastructure connecting them.
Yeah, the road itself.
Huh.
Because the only road connecting those two districts is a single, narrow translation bridge.
Just one lane.
Exactly. When you operate this way, a thought is generated in the native language downtown district because, well, your brain trusts it, it's safe there.
Right.
Then that thought gets packed up, sent across this narrow bridge, inspected for grammatical errors at a toll booth, reassembled into English, and finally pushed out of your mouth.
And by the time that entire sequence finishes, the real-life conversation you were trying to participate in has already moved on.
They're talking about something else entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this goes against a lot of what we learn in school,
It really does.
Weren't we taught that studying grammar rules is the exact tool we need to build a better, wider bridge? I spent years memorizing verb conjugation charts thinking that eventually, if I just knew the rules well enough, the traffic on that bridge would clear up.
Yeah, and that assumption is what linguists refer to as the interface problem. It's essentially the great grammar myth.
Wait, really? The great grammar myth?
Absolutely. The issue lies in the difference between explicit and implicit knowledge. So the conscious knowledge of grammar rules, the kind of rigid structures you get from a textbook, is explicit knowledge.
Okay.
It is inherently slow, it's analytical, and it requires intense focus. But true fluency in any language relies on implicit knowledge. It relies on instinct and, automated motor skills.
So it's more like riding a bike than solving a math problem.
Exactly. When you are standing in front of someone having a rapid-fire conversation, you literally do not have the cognitive bandwidth to consciously think, oh, wait, is this a countable or uncountable noun? Do I need to use the present perfect tense here?
Oh, I've been there.
If your brain stops to analyze those variables, the conversation stalls out entirely.
That makes so much sense. I remember being in Paris a few years ago trying to order a simple coffee. I knew the vocabulary. I had totally rehearsed it.
Of course.
But standing at the counter, my brain started frantically checking if the noun was masculine or feminine and if I was conjugating the verb correctly for a polite request. The barista was just staring at me, and I just completely froze. My mind went blank.
You experienced your internal monitor turning all the way up.
The internal monitor.
Yeah. Traditional grammar study actually trains that internal monitor to be hypervigilant.
Mhm.
It trains your brain to treat every single sentence like a high-stakes test. And when someone asks you an unexpected question, or, you feel the social pressure of a native speaker just staring at you, that internal monitor panics.
That is exactly what happened to me.
Right. The translation engine stalls because it's trying to be perfect, and you freeze. The human brain just cannot consciously check complex grammar rules and simultaneously produce fluent natural speech. The two processes compete for the exact same cognitive resources.
So if the grammar textbook is actually a trap that creates that paralysis, what are fluent native speakers doing differently? I mean, they can't just be throwing words together at random.
No, they're not. But they don't build sentences word by word at all.
Really?
Think about assembling, like, Swedish furniture. A language learner is trying to build a sentence by looking at the manual, finding screw A, attaching it to plank B, and just hoping the structure holds.
Right, checking the instructions constantly.
Native speakers don't do that. They rely heavily on what linguists call chunks.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Chunks, like prepackaged groups of words that are just stored together, right?
Right. Exactly.
Phrases like, as far as I know, or let me think about that, or to be honest with you.
Precisely. Because these chunks are retrieved from memory as a single neural item, the cognitive load is incredibly low. The grammar is already baked into that one item.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Instead of consciously pausing to think about complex grammar like whether they need a subordinating clause, those connecting words like although or because that link two separate ideas together, the brain just hands them the complete perfectly formed thought.
So they don't have to build it from scratch every time.
Never. They just feel a certain way, like feeling the need to express uncertainty. And the phrase, as far as I know, simply appears. They trust the language instinctively, which means their internal monitor is turned almost entirely off.
Thinking about my own speech right now, I probably mess up my native grammar a dozen times an hour. I start a sentence, I lose my train of thought, I say, I restart entirely. We do not speak perfectly in our mother tongue. We aren't robots.
We absolutely don't. And it is a huge relief for language learners to realize that native speakers make grammatical errors every single day.
Thank goodness.
Right. They constantly use fillers like, and well, to buy themselves time. The crucial difference between a fluent speaker and a struggling learner is the reason for the pause.
Okay, what do you mean?
A native speaker pauses to think about meaning. They're trying to figure out what they want to say next. A language learner usually pauses because their translation engine is stuck trying to figure out how to say it.
Meaning over perfection. Real human communication is just trying to get the idea across, and as long as the meaning is clear, minor grammatical errors are practically invisible in the flow of a real conversation.
Exactly. Your brain is designed to parse meaning, not grade a test. Learners hold themselves to this impossible, rigid standard of absolute perfection that native speakers don't even hold themselves to.
This brings us to a major pivot. Because if the goal is to stop building sentences word by word like a confused carpenter, and instead start grabbing these natural native chunks, how do we physically rewire our adult brains to bypass that downtown translation bridge altogether?
It requires a deliberate shift in your daily practice.
Yeah.
You really have to force the initial spark of a thought straight into English, bypassing your native language entirely. The sources outline a rewiring method to achieve this.
I really found the five senses anchor technique fascinating here.
It's so effective.
For you listening, imagine you are just walking to the grocery store. Usually your inner monologue is running in the background, just narrating your day in your native language. Instead, you anchor yourself in your physical environment using your five senses, and you directly observe reality in English.
Right, keeping it simple.
You look at the sky and think, it's really hot today. You listen and think, I hear traffic. You smell the air and think, I smell coffee.
It seems like a very basic exercise, almost too simple. But the neuroscience happening beneath the surface is profound. This is synaptic strengthening in action.
How so?
Every time you force your brain to connect a real-world physical observation directly to an English phrase, without using your native language as a middleman, you are literally paving a new neural pathway. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Wow.
By repeatedly practicing the direction of that first attempt, you bypass the old translation bridge and build a direct road.
It reminds me of typing on a keyboard.
Hmm.
When I am really in the flow of writing an email, my fingers just move. I'm not consciously visualizing the keyboard layout or instructing my left middle finger to stretch upward to find the E key. I just think of the word and my hands execute the movement. But if I suddenly stop, look down, and try to consciously locate the E key, I completely lose my rhythm. My hands just freeze.
That is the exact transition from explicit analytical memory to automatic procedural memory.
Hmm.
And, you build that in the stages.
What are the stages?
Well, you start with single thought switching. So just one isolated observation, like, it is getting dark. Once that feels natural, you move to phrase extension, where you chain thoughts together without translating, like, it's getting dark, I should turn on a light.
Okay, I see.
What's fascinating here is that the ultimate glue that holds these new neural pathways together is emotional anchoring.
Right, because the reason our native language feels so warm and natural is because those words are deeply tied to our real lives, our real memories, and our physical bodies.
They're visceral.
So to build an English inner voice, we have to artificially build those same visceral connections.
Yes. Your native language is anchored in your nervous system. If you want to own an English phrase, you can't just memorize its dictionary definition. Take the word exhausted.
Okay, exhausted.
If you just translate it on a flashcard, it remains an abstract concept. Instead, you need to sit for a moment and vividly recall a time you were truly bone-wearily tired.
Like after a brutal day at work or carrying heavy luggage up a flight of stairs.
Exactly. You actually let yourself feel that heaviness in your muscles, and in that exact moment, you say the phrase, I am exhausted, in your mind.
You are emotionally tagging the English phrase to a physical bodily reality. When you do that, the word stops being a translation and becomes a genuine expression of a feeling.
It becomes a piece of your actual lived experience.
But, this introduces a very real problem. Building this internal voice is fantastic when you're alone in your kitchen, practicing your emotional anchoring and talking to yourself.
Sure.
But what happens when another human being is staring at you, waiting for an answer? How do we ensure those words are actually there when we panic under the pressure of a live conversation?
That is the ultimate test of automaticity. You need to train your brain and your articulatory system to function under pressure. And a highly effective method for this is shadow and internalize.
Okay, break that down for us.
You take a short, 30 to 60-second audio clip of a native speaker, maybe a podcast excerpt or an interview, and you just listen to it. Then you play it again, and you overlap your speech perfectly with theirs. You become their shadow, matching their rhythm, speed, and intonation simultaneously.
You're forcing your mouth muscles to move at native speed. And because you are overlapping the audio, your internal monitor doesn't even have time to boot up and check the sentences for grammatical errors.
Exactly.
If you stop to think, you would instantly fall behind the audio.
It totally forces you out of your head and into the physical act of speaking. Once you've shadowed the clip, you move to the internalization phase. You turn the audio off entirely, and you try to summarize the concepts you just heard from memory in your own words, consciously trying to use the chunks you just shadowed.
And to really simulate the anxiety of a live conversation, there's the 60-second talk or pressure speaking drill.
Oh, this one is intense.
Yeah. You just pick a random prompt, literally anything, like why I chased my breakfast today or my favorite movie. You set a timer for exactly 60 seconds and you just talk. You do not stop.
No stopping.
You don't pause to translate. You don't correct yourself if you make a mistake. You just force your brain to find workarounds using whatever words you have available until the timer rings.
It trains your brain to survive the deeply uncomfortable feeling of not having the perfect word. It teaches you how to navigate around a missing vocabulary term using the chunks you do have, rather than, retreating back across the translation bridge to your native language to find the answer.
But forcing yourself to speak under pressure for 60 seconds assumes you actually have the words to reach for. I mean, if you're constantly grasping for vocabulary, the timer just runs out in silence. Let's look at the vocabulary ownership spectrum here.
Right, this is crucial.
Think of your vocabulary in 3 zones. Let's say zone 2 is rented vocabulary. You can use these words in a sentence, but it takes conscious effort and a few seconds of searching to go find them in your brain.
And before they're even rented, they start in zone 1 as borrowed vocabulary. You easily recognize the word when you read it in a book or hear it in a movie, but if you are speaking, you absolutely cannot summon it on your own.
Exactly. So we have borrowed, then rented, and finally zone 3 is owned vocabulary. It is automatic. The word just appears on your tongue the millisecond you need it.
Yes.
So how do we ensure we aren't just endlessly borrowing words? How do we convert a cheap rental into a fully owned house?
It all comes down to context and frequency. The human brain does not store words like individual flashcards in a filing cabinet. It stores them in complex, interconnected webs of association.
Okay.
If you want to move a word into that own zone, you must build context around it. You learn the word embedded within a chunk rather than in isolation. You apply the emotional tagging we discussed earlier, and most importantly, you ruthlessly prioritize frequency.
Ah, the 3,000 words rule.
Yes, the 3,000 most frequently used words in the English language cover approximately 95% of everyday communication.
That is wild. 95%.
It really is. If you focus your emotional anchoring, your shadowing, and your pressure, speaking specifically on those high-frequency words, you will experience a massive surge in practical fluency. You are building an unbreakable foundation with the vocabulary you actually need most.
So we have the neuroscience, the chunks, the shadowing, the emotional tagging. But let's get ruthlessly practical for a second. How does a busy listener actually fit all of this into a normal Tuesday? I mean, most people cannot quit their jobs to do full-time language immersion.
No, of course not. You don't need full-time immersion. You need strategic consistency.
Okay.
The sources outline a daily brain drill that requires about 45 to 75 minutes total, but it is deliberately scattered throughout the day to match your changing cognitive states.
Let's walk through what a day in the life of a learner looks like using this method. First, you have 10 minutes of morning activation. Before you even look at your phone, before you read the news, before your native language has a chance to fully take over your brain for the day, you listen to English audio. You're essentially setting the cognitive tone and booting up the English district of your brain first.
Exactly. Then, later in the morning, maybe you have 15 minutes of commute shadowing, your hands are busy driving, or you are sitting on the train. But your articulatory system, your mouth and vocal cords, can practice overlapping with native audio, building that muscle memory.
Midday, you find a quiet spot on your lunch break for a quick 10-minute session. This is where you do your think out loud observations or a few 60-second pressure speaking drills.
Perfect.
Then in the evening, when you have more time, you dedicate 15 to 20 minutes to deep input. You watch a show, a YouTube video, or listen to a podcast about a topic you genuinely care about, completely in English with absolutely no subtitles to fall back on.
And finally, a brief 5-minute pre-sleep review.
Yeah.
As you're laying in bed falling asleep, you simply run through the events of your day using your English inner voice.
Just reflecting on the day.
Yeah. This is scientifically crucial because of memory consolidation. While you sleep, your brain is actively processing and solidifying the neural connections you made during the day, ending your day in English primes, that overnight process.
There is one major trapdoor to this daily schedule, though. The dreaded weekend collapse.
Oh, the weekend collapse will undo a week of hard work.
Really?
Yeah. When you spend Monday through Friday doing your drills, but then spend Saturday and Sunday entirely immersed in your native language, those fragile new English neural pathways start to go dormant. By Monday morning, it feels like you are starting from scratch.
So what do we do?
You only need about 20 minutes of maintenance on the weekend, maybe 10 minutes of audio in the morning, and 5 minutes of journaling at night, just to keep the coals of the fire hot.
All of this scheduling and brain rewiring assumes the learner is a blank slate, just executing tasks. But we know language learning carries a lot of emotional baggage.
It absolutely does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the linguist Stephen Krashen developed a concept called the affective filter.
The affective filter. What's that?
It is essentially the emotional barrier that governs language acquisition. When a learner feels anxious, embarrassed about their accent, or defensive about making mistakes, their affective filter skyrockets. The brain perceives a social threat and goes into a defensive posture, literally blocking linguistic input from being absorbed.
I know that exact feeling. It's like my brain shuts all the doors and windows to protect my ego from sounding stupid in front of a native speaker.
Exactly.
Even if you do the daily brain drill perfectly, if you hate your accent and feel deep shame every time you use the wrong tense, you are fighting your own nervous system.
To truly achieve fluency, you must lower that affective filter. You have to reframe your relationship with your accent.
It's hard to do.
It is, but instead of a source of shame, view it as a badge of honor. It is auditory proof that you took on the immense, difficult challenge of learning a new language. You must treat your grammatical mistakes purely as neutral data, just feedback on how to adjust your chunks rather than a personal failure. And a fascinating way to lower this filter is to consciously develop an English persona.
I find that concept so compelling. It's not about creating a fake version of yourself, but rather allowing a different facet of your personality to be expressed through this new linguistic framework.
Exactly.
Maybe you are a bit more direct and assertive in English, or maybe you are a bit more relaxed and playful because you don't have the same social inhibitions you do in your mother tongue. Leaning into that persona acts as a shield, lowering the affective filter and allowing the language to finally flow.
It's a profound shift. It's moving from the exhausting task of doing English to simply being in English.
So what does this all mean? It means that fluency is not some magical, distant destination that you suddenly arrive at after passing a final grammar test. It is a daily, living practice.
A relationship, really.
By abandoning the translation bridge, by harvesting natural chunks instead of single words, and by patiently rewiring your inner voice through emotional anchoring and scattered daily drills, you can fundamentally transform how your brain processes language.
You really can.
And that brings me to a final, really provocative thought for you to mull over today. We just touched on the idea of the English persona, but our sources mention something even deeper. Thinking in a second language can actually provide you with analytical distance.
Because a second language lacks the deep childhood emotional baggage of your mother tongue.
Exactly. The amygdala, the emotional center of your brain, isn't firing in the exact same way when you use words you learned as an adult.
Right, it's more detached.
So if building this English inner voice genuinely brings out a different persona and dampens that immediate emotional reactivity, could deliberately learning and thinking in a new language serve as a way to entirely rewire your emotional toolkit. If you are going through a severe personal crisis or facing a highly stressful decision, could forcing yourself to think through that exact problem in your second persona be the ultimate life hack for objectivity and mental clarity? There is no translation bridge, just a completely new perspective. Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.